Good morning. I find myself in the city centre of Vienna today at the stop Oberkarlsplatz, a busy public transport interchange in the centre of the city. Now, Vienna has a very extensive public transport system with lots of different modes. But then there is this one line that doesn't quite fit into any of these categories. This is the Badner Bahn, Vienna's only tram-train line. The Badner Bahn is a 27-kilometre long tram-train line running between Oberkarlsplatz in Vienna and Josefsplatz in the town of Baden, outside the city. The service is run by the Wiener Lokalbahnen, a subsidiary company which is part of Vienna's infrastructure provider Wiener Stadtwerke. A tram-train is essentially a public transport service that runs with tram-like vehicles at street level within the city, but then switches over onto a railway line and continues out of the city into the suburban region, sometimes also in mixed traffic with other railway services. In the case of the Badner Bahn, the section between Wien Oper and Stadtwerkeplatz is operated as a tram, in mixed traffic with Vienna's other trams operated by the Wiener Linien. After Stadtwerkeplatz, the service continues as a railway line on its fully dedicated track out of the city. The last section of the line in Baden is run as a tram service again. Tram train systems exist in many places across the world, the most famous example being the Stadtbahn in Karlsruhe. However, for Vienna, where public transport modes are generally very clearly distinguished from one another, the Badner Bahn is a unique solution, enabling passengers from suburban areas south of Vienna to reach Vienna's inner district without having to change vehicles. The line from Vienna to Baden has existed since 1907, although some parts of the system were already established as steam or horse-drawn tramways even before that. Originally, the Badner Bahn was built primarily for the purpose of freight, as in the late 19th century, the city of Vienna was growing at a rapid pace. Building construction was booming like never before, and the Vienna Ringstraße was currently being built. However, the factories where all the building materials were produced were situated outside the city, in places like Wiener Neudorf and Guntramsdorf, and therefore a new, more efficient mode of transport was needed to bring these building materials into the city. While freight transport played a significant role on the Badner Bahn in its early years, today it is almost solely used for passenger transport. We'll go into more detail about this later on, but for now, let's go and take a ride on the first section of the Badner Bahn.
Liebe Fahrgäste, herzlich willkommen in der Badner Bahn. Wir wünschen Ihnen eine angenehme Fahrt. Resselgasse. Fahrscheine kaufen Sie bitte online über unsere Easy-Mobil-App oder beim Automaten im Zug. Ausstieg rechts.
After leaving the terminus station, Wien Oper, the Badner Bahn's route runs through Vienna's inner districts. The operation on this section follows the legal principles of a tram, meaning that the driver watches the track ahead and proceeds only if it is visibly clear. There are no conventional railway signals on this section.
Johann-Strauß-Gasse. Umsteigen zur Linie 13a. Ausstieg rechts.
After the station Johann-Strauß-Gasse, the Badner Bahn disappears into an underground tram tunnel, which in Vienna is known as the U-Strab and was originally built in the 1960s. While there were plans to convert this tunnel into a full underground line one day, these plans never became reality. A few stops later, the Badner Bahn comes back onto street level, where it continues along the tracks of Tramline 62 towards Bahnhof Meidling. However, this has only been the case for a few years. Until 2018, the Badner Bahn used to have its own dedicated track, which led past the depot at Wolfganggasse. This depot was the Badner Bahn's administrative headquarters and maintenance facility ever since its first days of electric operation in 1907. However, as there have been ambitious plans to expand and modernise the Badner Bahn in recent years, a new and larger depot was constructed at Guntramsdorf, better suited to meet the demands of future operations. If you visit the site of the former depot at Wolfganggasse, you can see that a lot has changed in the last few years. This area has now become a new urban development area. But at the same time, the old engine shed where they once used to store the trains of the Badner Bahn has been kept and has now been redeveloped into Vienna's first food market. So where once the old trains of the Badner Bahn were stored, you now find international cuisine. And I find it especially nice that they've, kept the old engine shed and made it into something new and vibrant. And it forms a subtle reminder of the railway history that once shaped this site. Leaving the Gleisgarten behind us, we continue our journey along the Badner Bahn, this time on a different type of vehicle than previously, a Class 400. The Badner Bahn has three types of vehicles in service at the moment. The newest generation, the Class 500, the middle generation, the Class 400, and the oldest generation, the Class 100, which has been around since 1979, but they are soon to be taken out of service. Currently, the Class 100 units are only used occasionally when none of the newer vehicles are available, but generally it is possible to meet the peak vehicle requirement using only the newer Class 400 and 500 vehicles. However, if you do still want to see the older Class 100, I have a secret tip where you can still find one, which I will reveal to you later in the video.
S-Bahn sowie zu Regional- und Fernzügen. Ausstieg rechts.
Soon we pass Bahnhof Meidling, Vienna's second most important railway station. This is where the Badner Bahn transitions from its tram-style street running to a full railway operation. From here on, the tracks are completely separated from road traffic, level crossings are securely protected, and instead of operating under a line of sight, trains now run under conventional railway signalling.
Neu-Erla. Ausstieg rechts.
After crossing the city border, we come past Shopping City Süd, the largest shopping centre in Austria and one of the largest in all of Europe. The Badner Bahn station here opened in 1976, roughly the same time as the shopping centre itself was built. Located just outside Vienna in the municipality of Vösendorf, the shopping centre was constructed here mainly due to lower land costs. In the early 2000s, there were even proposals to extend Vienna's U6 underground line to Shopping City Süd in addition to the Badner Bahn. However, since this would have made the shopping centre even more attractive for shoppers from Vienna and would shift even more purchasing power out of the city than it already did, the city of Vienna has since shown little interest in pushing this project forward. I mean, personally, I don't think that an underground to Shopping City Süd is really necessary if you've already got the Badner Bahn. But one thing that I do find is missing here in terms of public transport provision is that there is no station further down at the southern end of the shopping complex. And I mean, obviously I know that these places are always going to be very car-centric, but I think, building a new station on an existing line wouldn't really cost that much, and I think it would make it more attractive for people to come here by public transport rather than using their car. What do you think about this? Leaving the commercial buildings of Shopping City Süd behind us, the Badner Bahn continues to the suburban fringes south of Vienna. On this non-urban stretch, stops are typically spaced about 1 to 2 kilometers apart, which is closer than on mainline railways, but wider than traditional tram stops in an urban environment. The Badner Bahn is therefore often called a Lokalbahn or local railway. Few passengers actually travel the full route from Vienna to Baden. Instead, most people use it to commute between the towns along the line. The next stop is Maria-Enzersdorf Südstadt, which serves a large housing area in the eastern part of Maria-Enzersdorf, and played a significant role in the Badner Bahn's development during the 1960s. While the line had flourished during its early decades of operation, after the Second World War, the Badner Bahn went through some very challenging times. As the industrial areas south of Vienna were main bombing targets from the Allied forces, the infrastructure was significantly damaged in the post-war period. With a large decline in passenger volumes and limited resources for repairs, the line had become considerably run down. There were multiple occasions on which a complete closure of the Badner Bahn had been predicted. One of the reasons that a closure of the line could be prevented was the rapid urban development south of Vienna that started to take shape in the 1960s. It was at that time that a large new housing development site was built in the east of Maria-Enzersdorf, in connection with some new headquarters of EVN, Lower Austria's main energy supplier. The new housing district was designed so that people working at the EVN could live in close proximity in the homes provided, while finding all their amenities for their daily needs nearby, including access to public transport. Situated along the line of the Badner Bahn, a new station was opened there in 1964. Therefore, Südstadt became an early example of transit-oriented development in Vienna's metropolitan region and helped increase passenger volumes in the following years. This in turn allowed for new investments to take place to make the Badner Bahn more attractive again, like increasing the line speed and the acquisition of new vehicles. And I mean, no one can say for sure, but I think it is feasible to say that, if Maria-Enzersdorf Südstadt hadn't existed, then maybe today we wouldn't even have a Badner Bahn anymore. And that would have been a shame, because when you look at what the Badner Bahn is today, it has actually been a real success story. Through the continuous enhancement of the service in the last decades, passenger numbers have more than tripled compared to the 1970s. With trains running every 7.5 minutes to Wiener Neudorf and every 15 minutes to Baden, it is one of the most frequent railway lines in the suburban region around Vienna. So I've just come to Guntramsdorf because here we actually have something rather unusual along the Badner Bahn, which I don't think you actually have anywhere else in Austria. So let's go and have a look at it. So here in Guntramsdorf, we essentially have a section of the line that passes through the street. So like a tram, basically. But the interesting thing is, from a legal perspective, it is actually a full mainline railway. And you can see it, for example, they have like the kind of signs that you'd have at railway crossings usually. And this has some rather interesting implications because, like in the case of a disruption, for example, it means that the trains can actually travel on the wrong side of the road, even though it is mixed with car traffic. So I don't know of any other place in Austria where something like this exists. So yeah, it's quite interesting actually. By pure coincidence, on the day I was filming in Guntramsdorf, this exact situation occurred. As there had been a fire in one of the nearby houses a couple of hours before, one of the tracks on the Badner Bahn was still out of order. Therefore, I could see the trains travelling on the wrong side of the road. The road section in Guntramsdorf is also interesting for another reason. It is also used by freight trains serving a large industrial estate north of the village. To reach it, the freight trains have to run directly along the road right past residential homes. This has led to repeated protests from local residents, who have raised concerns about the noise and vibrations that the freight trains cause. In response, local politicians pushed for a new connection line to the industrial estate that would enable the trains to bypass the road through Guntramsdorf entirely. This link is now being built and is scheduled for completion by the end of 2025. But as this is the last remaining freight service on the Badner Bahn, this occasion will also mark the end of an era. Freight operations on the Badner Bahn will become a thing of the past entirely after more than 100 years. Roughly 15-minute ride from Guntramsdorf, the Badner Bahn enters Baden, where the tram switches back into an on-street tram operation. Here in Baden, we also find another old tram depot, which was shut down only earlier this year, and like the one at Wolfganggasse, was replaced by another more modern one at another location. Actually, this is the old building that has been around since the day of the old horse-drawn tramways in Baden. And, well, I don't know what's going to be happening with the building. If anybody knows, let me know in the comments. Before we continue along the last section through Baden, it's time to reveal where you can find the old Class 100 train that I mentioned earlier. From Baden-Liesdorf, I caught a bus over to Ebreisdorf, a village which sits roughly 15 kilometers away from Baden. On the grounds of what used to be the old train station of the village, you now find two old Class 100 vehicles, which have been permanently parked there and are occasionally used to hold events inside. Soon, these vehicles will no longer roll along the tracks, but it's good to see that at least two of the vehicles will remain visible to the public, waiting for curious visitors to discover them. Now, let's head back to the last section of the line through Baden. The section of the line through Baden is the only part of the Badner Bahn that is only single track. However, there are plans to duplicate the section within Baden, which will allow the short-running journeys between Vienna and Wiener Neudorf to be extended to Baden too, offering a 7.5-minute frequency during the daytime on the entire route. After passing Baden railway station, we soon arrive at Baden-Josefsplatz, the terminus station of the Badner Bahn in the centre of town. Baden is a famous spa town with a vibrant and historic town centre, which has long been a popular destination for leisure travellers. During the time of the Austrian monarchy, the imperial family would often visit Baden with a special luxurious carriage, also known as the Hofsalonwagen. This carriage has been preserved until the present day and now sits in Vienna's Transport Museum. As opposed to the terminus in Vienna, the final stop at Baden has two dead-end tracks. However, this has not always been the case, as once upon a time there was a turning loop at the terminus in Baden as well. But thanks to the newer vehicles in the 1980s having driver's cabs on either end, the turning loop was no longer needed and therefore the terminus was reconstructed in 1989. So as we can see, the Badner Bahn has changed a lot over the years, and especially also in the last 10 and 15 years, a lot has been done to modernise this line and bring it into the 21st century. But at the same time, this also means that a lot of the old historic elements that once shaped this line are slowly disappearing. But nonetheless, we can also still hold on to them in our memories. Recently, I managed to get my hands on an old headlight from a Class 100 train, the iconic older trains that used to define the Badner Bahn for many years. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it yet, but I think it's pretty special to have an original piece of Vienna's transport history in your own home. What do you think I should do with my new headlight? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you again in my next video.